News, Local Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance in San Diego County today. We are joined by Stephan. She is the Chief Deputy District Attorney of San Diego County. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to tell you a quick story. A few years ago, a family friend's daughter vanished. It was our friend's stepdaughter. She was 17 years old. She's still with us, but it became clear that she had been trafficked.
Wow.
And she was gone for 3 months.
That's incredible.
This is an upper middle class family. And unfortunately, I have a feeling, Ms. Stephan, that that's a story you hear often.
It is, and it's a perfect thing to say to make people aware that this can happen in any family. There are no families that are immune to this because of the social media. The predators are getting into our kids' bedrooms using the social media. So it's no longer where you're out on the street and you're getting kidnapped and driven away. They're just getting in and talking to our kids, talking in their ear, luring them away with promises of glamour, a better life, love, all those things that teenagers want to hear.
But what's so frustrating for me as I've learned about this topic is that so many of us in California believe that those that are trafficked for sex are non-Americans. Those that are trafficked for labor are non-Americans. We know that's not true.
It is not true. In San Diego, a good 80% of our sex trafficking victims are kids in our high schools. They're 15 to 16 years old. That's the most common age, with 17 being right in there, and sometimes younger. And they're getting recruited from our high schools and sometimes junior high.
And what's most scary about where we are today in San Diego is the 5 freeway takes us right up the state of California into Oregon, Washington, and Canada. And so this becomes, or has become, literally a highway for those that get trafficked.
It's definitely a corridor. I mean, San Diego has been on the top 13 cities for high-intensity child prostitution, which is just another way of saying sex trafficking. Right. Children don't prostitute themselves. So, you know, it involves renting a hotel room, getting to the hotel room, using credit cards, running a sophisticated criminal business.
And it's sophisticated. That's the key thing to remember. This is not some John picking up a kid and taking some cash. This is a bona fide, sophisticated criminal enterprise.
It is, and this is why gangs really and organized crime are the ones running it. 85% of our cases involve a gang member or several gang members because it is a criminal industry.
Before we talk about human trafficking, the labor side, I want to talk more about how we treat the victims in this matter, because I know there had been a time where these young girls, and sometimes boys, they were minors, they were trafficked, they were arrested, and they were prosecuted. Are we starting to look at the victims differently? Are we considering them victims, or are we considering them perpetrators?
We're definitely considering them victims. There has been a change, a huge change, and San Diego has led that change. This is why we're considered a model, a model for the state and for the country on how you follow a victim-centered approach. It's about victims. It's about getting accountability, putting the traffickers away, but doing it in a victim-centered manner where we're not just trampling over the victim and over her rights or his rights. We have a victim advocate team that's trained, trauma-informed, that immediately deals with the victim side, because sometimes cops are busy doing investigations. Their goal is to get this bad guy or gal off the streets and not have them victimize someone else. So they have noble goals, but their forte is not going to be dealing with the victim.
How can we ferret out sex trafficking? Because as I understand it, a child could still be in high school, down the road, still living at home, but yet is part of this criminal enterprise.
Exactly. So there are warning signs, and parents have to get educated about them, and so do teachers. We're spending a lot of time training school nurses, training teachers on the signs. For example, if you have a young girl and all of a sudden she has two phones, she's got a new, you know, designer bag, and you
Right.
know that she doesn't work and her family is of modest means. She's got tattoos, a new tattoo, especially with money symbols, bruises,
Bruising.
or she's
Right.
she's thin, and now she has a different circle of friends, because what happens is the traffickers really know how to isolate these victims. So once they trap them, they no longer feel comfortable with their old circle of friends. They have to find a new circle that doesn't look at them as a shameful human being.
I want to talk about human trafficking. And when I
Okay.
say that, I focus on the labor side.
Sure.
Is human trafficking as prevalent among Americans, meaning American citizens, as it is otherwise? So are we seeing more Americans in sex trafficking or human trafficking?
So like you said, in sex trafficking, 80%, over 80% are going to be American citizens. In labor trafficking, it's the other way. Over 80% are going to be not United States citizens. But there is a stereotype and a myth that we need to have people become
Please.
aware of. And that's that 70% of them enter this country legally on legal work visas.
That is something I did not know, and I'm
Exactly.
glad you're telling us this. I presumed that these were folks that were brought in by the metaphor coyote,
Yes.
and wind up being
No.
victims of labor trafficking.
Some, of course,
Sure.
but actually they enter on a legal visa. The trafficker makes sure that their visa expires so that they can have control over them.
Oh, I
So by
see.
the time they escape their conditions, they are now without a proper visa and don't know that they can seek help from law enforcement. They're afraid about their own status.
Given the incoming administration, how are you, as a local law enforcement official, going to handle this? Because I'm going to presume that fear of deportation is rising with the incoming administration.
Well, the United States and our laws are very clear. We protect everything that's on our soil. Our rights, having somebody not be victimized, those rights belong to everyone. And so the law enforcement doesn't distinguish and doesn't ask questions as to, are you a victim who has documentation or not?
At the same time, are you concerned that even though you may not do that, these victims will be afraid to even come forward? And as a result, they are further victimized, and they then can't help others who maybe, if they came forward, would no longer be victimized.
The victims are afraid. They're afraid to come forward because if they don't have a legal status, then they believe that they're going to be in trouble. It's our job, and that's what we do through victim service providers, churches, and different community organizations. We try to educate that they have rights and that we understand that they entered this country legally, but that it is the trafficker's tool, it is the weapon of the trafficker to make sure that they lose their identification.
Her name is Summer Stephan. She is the Chief Deputy District Attorney of San Diego County. We thank her for her work dedicated to the men and women of San Diego. My name is Brad Pomerance. You're watching Local Edition.